Hey you guys, my name is Michaela. I'm the owner of Soko Studio. We make reusable menstrual pads in our Shopify store, and you guys have one of the biggest questions that I want to help answer, and that is, how many cloth pads do I need? A lot of you seem to be a little overwhelmed or intimidated, confused, and just need help getting that initial stash created. And so learning how many you need is basically where you're going to start. So I'm going to teach you guys today to figure out exactly how many cloth pads you need. The real ultimate answer to the question is there's not an answer. There's no real correct answer to how many cloth pads you actually need. But we are going to go over some ideas that you'll need to take into consideration in order to find your number of cloth pads. Everybody's number of cloth pads that they have in their stash is going to be completely different. So where Susie may only have 5 cloth pads, Amanda could technically have 500 cloth pads. Everybody's number is going to be completely different. So I'm going to provide you with the information that you need to figure out the number of pads for you. So in order to figure out how many pads you need, you're going to ask yourself these questions. And I want you to get out a sheet of paper and write down next to each question the answer, because it's super simple and it's going to help you figure out the number of pads that you need. Okay, so the first question that you need to ask yourself is, how long is your period? I'm talking how many days. Is it 2 days, 5 days, 7 days, 15 days? Is it 2 weeks long? It's just different for everybody. So however long your period is, write that down. Mine, for example, mine is 7 to 9 days. The second question you're gonna ask yourself is, how heavy does your period get? And I'm talking like on your worst of the worst days. Are you gushing and can you not leave the house because you need to be near the toilet? Or is your heaviest day just kind of like a continuous flow, and it's steady, but it's it's rather heavy? It's manageable, you can leave the house. I want you to scale the flow of your period on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 being the lightest, 10 being the heaviest, and I will tell you guys my answer. I do believe that my heaviest day is a 10. Okay, so you got those two down. Now the third question is, how many days do you have that heavy flow? So from the last question, the heaviest part of your period, how many days is that? Mine is a solid 48 hours, and that's what I'm going to put down as the answer to my question. So 48 hours out of a 7-day period is the heaviest flow for me. Okay, the next question is, are you going to be combining your menstrual pads with a cup or tampons or any other menstrual product? Or if you're going to be combining them, you need to write that down. If you're going to be using tampons with them, if you're going to be using a menstrual cup or disc with them, if you plan to use any other item that's out there that helps with menstrual periods, such as period panties or whatever, write that down, what you're going to be using in conjunction with your cloth pads. Okay, the next question is, if you're not going to combine, are you solely going to be using menstrual pads by themselves with no other item? Maybe you'll just, basically just your panties and your pads. Okay, so answer that question. The next question is, are you going to use them full-time or part-time? For me, I use them full-time. I do use mine with a menstrual cup. So I am full-time menstrual cup. My heaviest bleeding is 48 hours. It's super heavy on a scale of 10, and my period lasts about 7 days. And then the last question that I'm going to have you guys answer is, how many disposable pads do you go through in one full day? Just on average. Are you going through just 2 or 3? Are you going through like 5 to 7? Write it down. Also write down how many you would go through on your heavier days and your lighter days. And then I want you to add up all of those numbers. So if you're going through 5 pads a day for 7 days, that's 35 pads, okay? So now what you're gonna do is you're gonna reduce 35 down, because you can normally wear a reusable menstrual pad for about twice as long as you could a disposable pad. For some reason, they just tend to absorb easier, better, they're more comfortable, they last a lot longer, and so you're gonna be able to cut that down by at least 5 pads. If your period is, as I said, 7 days, super heavy, you're full-time, you're only using pads, then I'm going to recommend that you get 30 pads. 4 to 5 pads a day is how many you're gonna need. So 4 to 5 pads for 7 days of a period, talking 28 to 30 pads. However, you do not have to buy all 30 pads at once. Start with just 5 pads a month or 2 pads. Get enough to use. You can even go shopping to get enough pads for just 1 day of your period each month. So what I recommend, because they can be pricey at first, because normally you're used to purchasing a package of pads for $7 at the store, where 1 pad of reusable pads can start at $7 for just the 1 pad. So I recommend, in order to budget and to just be more financially conscious about how you're spending your money, and it's so easy, by the end of like a 4-month cycle, like 4 months of your cycles, you will have enough pads and plenty of options. The reason that I recommend you only buy a few at a time and not all 35 at once, and you can do that, that's perfectly fine. A lot of people do that, but I do recommend you take this into consideration. Say you end up buying 35 pads from a company and you get them and you don't like them. You try them on, they don't absorb well, they don't fit right, you don't feel comfortable in them, they're not doing what you need it to do for your body, for your period. Now you're stuck with 35 pads from this company that you spent a lot of money on, and you can't even use them. So what I suggest that you do is just buy a few at a time, not only to save you some upfront costs, but also to try out different brands, different kinds, styles, sizes, shapes, absorbency levels. You want to try all of that out at first, so that way you know what you like before you make that big investment. A lot of my customers, when they come to me at first, they will buy 1, 2, maybe 3 pads, and then I see this every time. They come back the next time I have a new release and they buy it up. They buy 15, 20 pads because they love it so much. They decided that once they tried it, that they worked for them, so now they can make that bigger investment on more pads with a company that they like. So and let's talk about my period for a second. My period, I have all of the cloth pads that I've made that I messed up on when I was making them, that I didn't want to put in my shop because I thought they were too imperfect, and I thought that they just shouldn't be sold. So I took them and I just threw them on my box. And I ended up with around 20 or so, and then every once in a while I have another one, another one, another one. So I have a big old box full now. I would say there's probably like 40 in there. I never go through all of those pads. I use like 12 to 15 pads tops on my periods, and my periods are 7 to 9 days long. I also use a menstrual cup and period panties, so take that into consideration. I only use the menstrual cup on day 2, 3, and 4. So the first day and the last 3 days, I do not use a cup. I will use period panties sometimes when I don't even need a pad, but sometimes I'll need a liner on that as well, because I just want to change it out or whatever. So for me, that's about how many I go through, is 12 to 15 on a full heavy cycle. So I think that would be some helpful and useful information. Your stash will always be a work in progress as you perfect what works for you over time. Don't stress about not having enough. Don't stress about not knowing you know, how many you should be buying, how much money you should be spending on them. Don't let that overwhelm you. Don't let that be the deal breaker, that you have to spend all this money or you have to buy all these pads in order to do it right. That's just simply the hard way, untrue, and I don't recommend that you do that at all. I want you to start out slow, pick a couple brands that you want to try out, pick a couple of styles that you like. Maybe you only like minky and you don't like cotton velour, or maybe you only like stay dry so that, you know, it wicks the moisture away from you and you don't want someone else's fleece or flannel, but maybe you also need some overnight pads. So you want to invest in having enough overnight pads for every night of your period, so you have 5 of those. So just get a piece of paper out, answer all of these questions, jot down some notes, research some companies that you like, and buy 1 or 2 pads here and there every month. And before you know it, you're going to have the perfect stash. You're going to have tons of pads and you won't even have to worry about buying more until you get to that point in your pad buying career where you're just obsessed with them and you're buying them because it's a cool new print and you need it. It's like, oh my gosh, I have to have that. You know, at some point you're going to get to that level and it's just going to be fun at that point. So that's all I have for you guys today. Thank you guys so much for coming. Please make sure you subscribe, like, comment your questions. Tell me in the comments, how many pads do you have in your stash right now? And are you still looking to buy more, or do you think that you're done? So let me know that in the comments. Thank you guys. I hope that this was helpful and useful, and I'll see you back next week.